Hey guys, happy Monday and welcome back to another video lecture. Back by popular demand. You guys just love these so much, I had to keep making them. So today we are continuing our lesson from Friday, which was on vascular plant reproduction. I kind of wanted to go over that and explain it and have individual diagrams for each group of plants to really drive that point home. So, yeah, and then Wednesday we'll be reviewing everything that we've been learning over the past 2 weeks and a little more, and Friday we'll be quizzing on that. So, let's go ahead and get started with vascular plant reproduction, part 2. So, all plant life cycles are basically the same, they just switch it up a little bit. So some may have cones with seeds in them, some may have flowers, some may have spores, but they all follow this basic plant life cycle. Plants have what we call alternation of generations, which I talked about last week, but I will remind you, it means they basically have 2 parts of their life cycle, so they kind of have 2 parts of their life. So they spend part of their life as a gametophyte and then part of their life as a sporophyte. So these are their alternations of generations, the gametophyte and the sporophyte life phases. So every plant life cycle looks like this. The gametophyte gives rise to some form of eggs and sperm, which are then fertilize each other. The sperm fertilizes the egg to become a sporophyte. So the gametophyte results in fertilization, which results in the sporophyte. The sporophyte then, through the process of meiosis, produces spores, which then grow into the gametophyte. So they both give rise to each other. The gametophyte produces gametes, which are then fertilized, that grow into the sporophyte. The sporophyte produces spores through meiosis that then grow into the gametophyte. So it's pretty simple, but it gets a little more complicated for each plant group that we get into. So we talked about ferns, gymnosperms, and angiosperms are 3 groups of vascular plants on Friday. And we are going to continue our conversation about their life cycles today. So first up, the ferns. Let's hear it for the pteridophytes. Woo! Silent P. So our fern life cycle is just like every other plant life cycle. You have a gametophyte, sporophyte, fertilization, and meiosis. This is what every plant life cycle looks like. It's just the in-between bits that make it complicated. So we are going to start down here with the actual fern itself, which is the sporophyte. So all vascular plants, ferns, gymnosperms, and angiosperms are sporophyte dominant, which means that their dominant life stage is the sporophyte stage. So when you're looking at a fern, or you're looking at a pine tree, or you're looking at a cherry blossom, you're looking at the sporophyte. The gametophytes are tiny structures that vary depending on what type of plant you're talking about on their location, and they play a very minimal role. So all of our vascular plants are sporophyte dominant. So what that means for ferns is that the actual fern itself, when you're looking at it, is the sporophyte. And then if you turn a fern frond over, so you look at the bottom side of their leaves, oftentimes you'll see those little brown dots that cover the surface of the leaves, like that. Those are called sori, which is the plural. The individual would be sorus, and that's basically a cluster of spore capsules. So when we talked about bryophytes, moss, you remember their sporophytes grew up little stalks from the moss itself, and then they would release the spores. So ferns are kind of similar, but they result in these clusters on the underside of the fern frond, which are clusters of sporangia, which you don't have to know. And that's basically just structures that create spores. So Through the process of meiosis, they create these spores. So now we have all these loose spores up here. They spread out and look for moist ground, and when they find it, they grow into a gametophyte. So the gametophyte, it's root-like structures, so it grows into the ground with that. And it's this teeny tiny little green lima bean looking thing. My drawings are not the best, but they'll do. And then on the gametophyte, you've got the male and the female structures, which are tiny little structures. The male are up here and the female's here, and this is kind of a zoomed in version. So the male, just like for bryophytes, is called the the Antheridia, and the female is called the Archegonia. So the male Antheridia produces the sperm, and the female Archegonia produces the egg, and if it's moist enough, the sperm will fertilize the egg. So when the sperm enters that Archegonia, is that right? Yes. When the sperm enters the female Archegonia, it fertilizes the egg. Fertilization occurs, and what you get is a zygote, which is a fertilized embryo. So the zygote then grows into the sporophyte, which is our fern. So the zygote is kind of like a seed, if ferns had seeds, and that grows into the fern itself. So the fern kind of grows out of this initial gametophyte structure. So that is the fern life cycle broken down a little bit. Just one more time. You've got the sporophyte, which is actually the fern itself. On the underside of the fern frond, you have the sori, which are the clusters of spore capsules. They create spores through meiosis, which, bringing you back to biology, meiosis is so mitosis, you've got mitosis and meiosis. I know it's like 2 years ago stuff for you guys. For me, it's like 5 years ago stuff, so hang on. So mitosis is basically like just cell division. So a cell duplicates all of its chromosomes and then splits in half, and so it results in 2 of the exact same cell, so there's no like mixing of anything, and they are genetically identical. Meiosis is a little bit more complicated. They do some chromosome swapping, and they end up with 4 cells instead of just the 2, but each of the 4 only has half of the original chromosome count. So they only have 1 set of chromosomes instead of 2. So when they only have 1 set of chromosomes, we call those haploid cells, and when they have 2 sets, we call those diploid cells. So for plant life cycles, we can actually use this. If we're in the red section up here, we are haploid, which means they only have 1 set of chromosomes. So our spores cells only have 1 set of chromosomes. Our gametophyte cells only have 1 set of chromosomes. After fertilization, it becomes diploid. So these are all of our diploid cells. They all have 2 sets of chromosomes. So our fern itself, which is the sporophyte down at the bottom, he's got 2 sets of chromosomes in each cell. But after the cell goes through, after they perform meiosis, those cells split into 4 each, and those are now haploid spores, which grow into the gametophyte. The gametophyte produces the sperm and the egg, and the sperm and the egg fertilize each other and become a diploid zygote. So that is for ferns. Our next group of vascular plants are gymnosperms, which are like our conifers, so pine trees and ginkgos, stuff that related to conifers. So our gymnosperm life cycle once again looks the same. We've got our gametophyte up top, fertilization, the sporophyte, and meiosis. Here it gets a little bit different because we've got the sporophyte again is the entire plant, so the entire pine tree is the sporophyte, but it produces 2 entirely different structures separate from one another, in this case cones, that, in which case one is male and one is female, they each, through meiosis, produce a kind of spore. In this case, it's going to be pollen, and then the egg, which is also called the megaspore sometimes, which is going to result in the gametophyte, and they're going to fertilize each other and result in the embryo. So down here we've got our sporophyte. Remember, we are diploid at this point. We've got 2 sets of chromosomes per cell. They produce male cones, which are like the smaller squishy green cones that you'll find at the end of pine tree limbs. That's the male cone. The female cone are the actual, like the brown things that we think of when we think of pine cones. So like the spiky guys. Those are the female cones. So through meiosis, the male cone produces pollen, which is it's basically like plant sperm, and then the female cone produces the egg or the megaspore. So this would be like a one scale of a female pine cone, and the egg is inside. Then once the pollen moves from the male cone, gets picked up by the wind or water or living thing, whatever, and rubs off onto the female cone, it will find its way to the egg. Fertilization occurs, we get an embryo, and then we get a seed, which will then grow into the sporophyte once it finds somewhere to land and germinate. So this is our gymnosperm life cycle. So just like our fern life cycle, we've got the diploid sporophyte, which has the male cone and the female cone, which are technically still a part of the sporophyte, until through meiosis they produce pollen and the egg, and the pollen fertilizes the egg, and we become diploid again. So the pollen and the egg itself are haploid cells, and then once they fertilize, they become diploid again. So this is our gymnosperm life cycle. That's how pine trees reproduce. And last but certainly not least, we have angiosperms. So once again, you've got your sporophyte on the bottom, you've got your gametophyte up top, you've got meiosis and fertilization. So it's the exact same life cycle every time, it just looks a little bit different. So just like with our gymnosperms and our ferns, everything on the bottom, the sporophyte portion of the life cycle, is all diploid cells, and the top half up here, all the gametophyte stuff, is haploid, which means they only have 1 set of chromosomes. So they have half as many chromosomes as all these guys. So once again, the sporophyte itself is the full tree or flower, if we're just talking wildflowers. So the whole angiosperm plant itself is the sporophyte. But they are a little bit different. They don't produce cones like gymnosperms do. They produce flowers. So this is a very rough drawing of a flower. There's a much better one in your notes from last week. So you've got the flower, which has both the male and female structures in one. So unlike the cones of a gymnosperm, where you've got the female cone and the male cone, you've just got one flower. And the male parts, like we talked about on Friday, include the anther and the filament. And then the female parts include the stigma, style, and the ovary, which holds the little ovum and the ovule inside, which is like the egg. So all the parts are right here. So through meiosis, once again, we get haploid cells like pollen and the egg. So these are our haploid sex cells. And the pollen has to find its way to the stigma of the female part of the flower, down to the ovule, fertilize it. We have the process of fertilization, and it results in a diploid seed. So we've got the embryo inside, we've got the seed encapsulating it, and then we've got a fruit encapsulating that. So this seed will find somewhere to germinate. It might be taken up by an animal and eaten and then pooped out somewhere, and then it germinates. So our seed then grows into our sporophyte plant. So this is the angiosperm life cycle. So the main difference between the angiosperm and the gymnosperm is we're talking flowers instead of cones, but it's always the same story of the male and female gametes fertilize, result in a diploid cell that is then going to eventually grow into the plant itself. All three of these diagrams are on Schoology in PDF form for you to print out and study and enjoy, or copy down on your own sheet of paper. There are also, if you just Google fern life cycle, make sure it's kind of similar to what we're looking at, or gymnosperm life cycle if you want something maybe color-coded or a little bit more descriptive. But make sure it's kind of similar to our diagrams, because some of them can get really, really complicated, and we're not getting super complex with this. We just kind of want the 4 basic parts of the gametophyte, fertilization, sporophyte, and meiosis. So that's what we're looking for in all of our plant reproductive cycles. So study those diagrams. Those are your only notes for today. Answer the questions on Schoology, which I believe are just to fill out those diagrams, so use the notes to do that. And that's about it for today. Hope you guys have enjoyed your first couple weeks at home. Hang in there, get outside, try new things, find a hobby. I've been running, so we're all trying new things. A bunch of new experiences for all of us. So yeah, take care of yourselves, and I will hopefully see you soon.